Is everyone allergic to the front seats? I feel so not close.
I was telling somebody that,
It's fine.
he was telling me, listen here, and I was like, no, I wouldn't come here because nobody wants to come here.
I can see you closer. Just for you, John.
You may get a free t-shirt if you go to the front row.
Oh, that's a good one. I can't pull that off. The only t-shirt I have is this one right here. I'm not doing that.
Yep.
He's on the next floor there, 36th floor.
So anything embarrassing that might show up in my browser was his fault, because obviously that wasn't my stuff.
That's a good idea. Whoa, those are,
You know,
those are window slash.
on the internet we use forward slashes.
Just
Why would you go to Chrome, really?
no, it's an across the pond keyboard. It's not your fault.
I actually don't type in QWERTY, it's Dvorak, so this is yeah, sorry.
I don't think I've ever met someone who actually uses Dvorak.
So it doesn't go like that?
No. /7? Oh, here they go.
This is what?
This is a game in and of itself.
Yeah, this is.
Watching Glenn type.
Yeah. I've got a hand problem, so I switched some years back and never looked back. Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna get things roughly started here. Thank you so much for coming. I see some familiar faces, some completely unfamiliar faces, so I'm glad to see both the people who are here new and the people who are just who I've seen many times before. I'll get into it a little bit in between. Roughly, we're going to start off with a talk by Glenn about ES5 to ES6 or ES 2015 transformations. Then I will regale you with my attempts, poor attempts at jokes, as well as information about our next meetup in next year. And then Chris will talk to us about all sorts of interesting things. I want to first start off by thanking a few people and introducing someone. So for the people who have been here many times before, I am typically the Wi-Fi?
No, full screen, it's fine.
So I am typically the organizer here who talks and who roughly organizes things. But so this last week and a half or so has been pretty crazy for me. The people who were here at the last meetup, I just got married. Exactly a week and a half ago, roughly. I got back from my honeymoon approximately 48 hours ago. Thank you. And as such, I did not have at all the time to pull all of this off without at all the help of my new co-organizer, who I'm very happy to introduce, Bulos Dib, over there. Without him, this would not have happened. We would not have been able to both secure this space as well as have this meetup for all of you here tonight. So he will be getting more involved. I'm very excited to be working with him with this meetup to continue to grow both the meetup as well as the people's knowledge who happens to attend. If any of you are interested in helping out with the meetup, we might be more convinced after the meetup is over to have that kind of conversation, please let me know. We'd always love help in both actually organizing this thing as well as speakers going forward, because I have a calendar filled out till at least March or so, and I'd like to get that even longer. So without further ado for now, and you'll hear a lot more bad jokes from me eventually, I will start off by introducing Glenn Hinks, please.
Okay, so thank you for having me here. My name's Glenn Hinks, and I work for a company called Kissway, a small company. We do sports video streaming. I'm a veteran developer. I'll give you my background, but I have a long server-side history, but not so much in these new technologies. So came along to this meetup in February 2014. Somebody asked me how long I've been coming. I think John Paul remembered. I came in and asked people like, so what editor do you use for this JavaScript stuff? You know, because I was convinced this JavaScript stuff would go away and be replaced by something that I would love, more sort of Java-y or C-sharpy or something that I was used to. Anyway, it didn't. So thank you for John Paul for showing patience with me. I'm now a full-fledged Node developer. I just do Node all day long. I like it very much. And congratulations. Now, this is my way of giving some sort of give back to the community. I can do a talk. What I'm going to say applies to both server and sort of client side. Yeah, this is like you've got a big legacy ES5 project and you want to convert it to be ES, 2015 in JavaScript 6, however you want to do it. And this is how I went around doing it. So this is one way of doing it, and I'd like to talk to you about that. First question you have to answer is, why? Why do you want to do this? Right? They're the straight off the top of my head answers. Now you can't say those at work, yeah. And my theme will be sort of a Home Alone-y themed one. They're the answers that you might give flippantly, but I'm being a bit facetious there, because really, unless you have a good business reason, they might just say no, and you have to justify why you're doing this now. Any of you, hands up. Any good reasons why? Why should you convert? Why? What's in it? What's in it for them, the people with the bank accounts and what have you? How do they get something out of this? Because you can't do anything much more than you can now. So what?
Consumption?
He's not allowed to answer me. Because you like out there, yeah. You like that. What is it? What is in it for them? Any, throw your hands up.
Hiring.
That's really important. Yeah. People like shiny new things. Anything else?
Efficiency.
Efficiency. Yeah.
Easy to understand.
It's a lot easier and clearer. That's a really good reason. Okay, so here's a more conventional. It is easier and clearer than ES5. Right? Second thing is you have no choice, because as John Paul says, no one's going to want to work on the old stuff in a year or two. So if you go along and say, let's do this nice shiny ES5, oh no, I want to work on the new stuff, because you're really tying people's hands behind their backs. Now, when you do this conversion, you're going to require a single look and feel. So if people start using a new syntax, you're going to have a bit of file over here, a bit of stuff over there, some transpiling going on. It's not really going to work. You're going to have a sort of a really ugly code base. So what you want is a single cohesive code base that looks and feels the way you want it. And you have to give business reasons for that. And the main one I think is if you don't, the business doesn't, you will lose a significant competitive advantage against people who can write clean, easy code and start using nice things like yield and later on the async await type things, in generator functions. So you have to have a story about why you're doing this. Unless you surreptitiously go away and do it in a couple of afternoons like me and then come back and go, I've done it, we should all do it. So that's the why. I want to try and give yourself a little bit of a problem definition here. Now, if your code is not unit tested, it is not linted, it is not well structured, you've got a problem, okay? But if it is, I can assure you, it's really quite straightforward to go from an ES5 coding standard with a load of linting rules to an ES6 2015 coding standard with a load of linting rules. And you can do it gradually and in a piecemeal fashion, and I promise you, you won't get burned. Maybe. Okay. So the next thing I'd say to you is, and as in my last one, I'm not following my notes now. So what's holding you back? What do you think's holding you back? Now there's going to be some interaction now. Any of you? Why haven't we done it? Why aren't we all doing Babel? Why aren't we transpiling? Why didn't we do it last month? Why not? Go on.
Most of my other team members aren't in concordance with this opinion, and they're going to be doing it the old way for more than a while.
That's one reason. Any other reasons?
Legacy environment?
Yes? Any other reasons?
Time.
Yeah, that's part of that answer. It is. It's just going to take a lot of time. And what do they get for it, the business people? Well, they don't get anything. Not initially. They don't get anything. And the other one is, and that's the other answer, it's terrifying to a lot of people. They don't agree. Oh my God, why on earth would we want to go and do this? That is what I think holds people back, because when you look at the new language structure and all of the things, all the goodies they're giving you, no developer would honestly want to go and use the old stuff when given the choice of using the new stuff. So that's just kind of the introduction. But so how do you go about it? So, one metric. I did 10,000 lines. It took me 1 day, okay? I had well-structured, extremely unit-tested, very well-linted code. If you don't have that, it's going to be more difficult. But if you do follow very, very good practices, it's actually not as bad as you think, yeah? Because you're really doing this in a very, very mechanical, machine-generated way. And if that's the way you've been working, then it's not such a problem. So how? How do you go about doing this? Now, there's no right answer or wrong answer, and I'm sure Kevin had lots of right answers and wrong answers, but I just sat down and thought, well, how can I do this and do it in a small fashion, bit by bit, without screwing up the code base? So I sat down and I thought, and I said, okay, if I don't have a flat structure like directories, okay, that's Express, and this is very common for a lot of people. I look down, open a folder, and there are just a lot of files. And as you can see from the scroll bar, it went down a long way. If that's what you've got, my approach might not be so hot for you. But if you've got sort of this sort of a structure, and this is like the largest number of files I've got anywhere in on a leaf node, then the approach I'm going to espouse to you actually works quite well. Yeah. So let's talk about the tools I used. Really simple tools. There's a package out there in NPM called X to6. You just run it on your files. It converts it, works out where it should be const, where it should be let, switches them around. Clever people have written that stuff. I pretend to understand all the things in it. I dug into it and I thought, yep, those people are good. Send them a nice email thanking them. Okay, this is a language I loathe with abomination. And I've written bad things about it. But when it comes to one-liners for regular expressions, it still holds its own. So I had some very, very simple tools. I adopted a standard from Airbnb on ESLint for JavaScript 6 standards. And that is practically all there is on the tool in front. I have an 11-line shell script, which I just run on a folder. It converts it, goes through and fiddles around with all the regular expression brackets that I don't quite like to give me what I want. Okay, so how do you actually go around doing this? So I give you a little directory structure. I'm going to do this from an ESLint perspective. I know there's JS Hinks, there are various linters out there. This tool has one really good feature. The lint file, you can have multiple ones at different levels, so you can apply different coding standards to different areas of your code. Because you can't convert all of this, test all of this, build all of this in one day. You're going to be doing bits, one bit at a time. Essentially, just take one section of the code, convert it, unit test it, build it, do everything you need to do with it, and satisfy people that you've not screwed up and that they don't have to live in ES5 land forever, which is a fear people have. You're going to break it. And of course, if you're not well linted, well structured, and unit tested, you probably will break it. But those prerequisites, I'm going to stick with them. So this is what I would suggest you do. You choose the deepest, furthest folder down somewhere, way, some piece of code that doesn't matter. You run a script on it, you convert it. I do have a reference to a GitHub repository where I have a little script. You can run this and do this. You copy an ES, after you've done an ES 2015 linting file to there. You run lint, make sure it's fine, yeah, it complies to your standards. If not, you fix up your script, you change it, and you iterate. You do this repeatedly in the folders, building your way up. You fix your issues. You get something like this from the tool, the X to 6. So it'll do very simple things. I've given very simple code here. It'll change your vars to consts, and there are other things with your anonymous functions, put fat arrows in and so forth and so on. I didn't want to give complex examples here, because I just wanted to go through the general process, because people are saying, well, how do I do it? How do I start? Well, the way is you just start small. And if you have a good structure, you can do this. So what you do is, I just have two lint files. One, I have two standards, one Airbnb ES5, one Airbnb for 2015. And I just copy it in, rename it at the lowest level after I've converted the files, run all the tests, run all the lints, test the crap out of it. If it's fine, I go on and do the next one. And I repeat this. Eventually you'll have one folder, and you'll be able to move all of the ESLint files now and put it in the containing parent folder. And as you can see, all you've got to do is just go from the bottom and build your way up. Now obviously some folders will take longer than others. That's just how it is. But it's a very, very systematic approach, a very, very scientific manner. If you do have well-structured, well-linted, unit-tested code, you can just take this very, very simple approach. And to be honest, you can demonstrate to people, look, I've done this section here, it's all converted, it all works. You know, Bob's your uncle, another British expression you're using, you'll be fine. Now, that's about it for me. I have this deck up on slides.com. I also have a little GitHub repository with an 11-line piece of code that you can actually do this with. It's really, really very straightforward. And I know there's a lot of fear involved with this sort of thing, because, you know, if you do it wrong, and it's your idea, it's your fault. But I don't actually believe you've got any real choice, because if your product is going to have any sort of life, and it's going to be a modern product, you've got to move. And it's better to move now and get it over with, because next year you're probably going to have to do something similar again. Or you could wait longer, perhaps never do it. But that's kind of how I feel about it. It's a very, very straightforward thing to do. Have a look at the little repository. All you've got to do is run a little shell script onto the scripts folder. It'll hit everything in the folder you are, convert them, do a few regex things, move your lint file around, run some unit tests, Bob's your uncle, you're done. And that's it. Any questions? Scott, go on.
I apologize, I may have missed you addressing this when I ran out. This is for Node, so my question is, are you running on just the V8 version of ES6, or are you using Babel and running dynamically?
I was using up until they merged a few weeks ago, version 12. Now I'm using version 4.2.2, which has all the ES6 features in, so I don't need to transpile. If you need to transpile, it really doesn't make a lot of difference, because you're...
Well, it doesn't have all, right? I don't think it has destructuring yet.
There are a few things it's missing, and you do run across them. The spread operator. Why would I ever need the spread operator? A week in, yeah, that would be kind of handy. I could use that. So, yes, there are things in there not in it. So you have a choice. If you want everything, you've got to transpile. That's all there is to it.
Okay, but right now you're advocating.
Well, no, actually, I'd advocate transpiling, but I went away and did this without telling anyone, and then I came in the next day and said, done. Because if you do that and set a precedent, it actually makes work be done in a day. Why can't we convert them all? Why haven't we done this? And then they start asking questions, saying, well, why are we on this one here? So you actually need someone to actually take a risk, first of all. And it is a little risky when I ask you what you've been up to. You say, well, we're now up to date. We need to update all of our Node modules, and we're going to be using the new 4.2 version of Node. But I would say almost all of this applies whether you're transpiling or not. And I'd actually say on the client side, you're probably better off with a transpiler, because there's still some features in there that are not there. And the stable version of Node, version 4, is going to get those features later than the unstable development version 5, which gets all the goodies first. They're talking about putting them back in, but I have a product to make, so I've got to use a stable version. And this is the closest I can get to all the goodies.
Thanks.
Joe?
I was just guessing. That's Mark.
Oh, Mark, sorry.
It's okay. I look a little like Joe. So how many issues did you have in the
Do you know, about 10, and that counts for the other 10 lines in my 11-line script. Just quickly, it really wasn't. A lot of these were, and excuse me for typing. I do not use a QWERTY keyboard, and I haven't done, gosh, for a long time. So when I type, I have to look. So if I show you the script,
Very serious in that. He's not that serious. I know.
So essentially you can see where I started off, right? I started off with this, and then oh yeah, buddy, these are all the problems I found. But these are just regular expression things, and some of them were not problems. Some of them were, my God, I've been a C++ programmer for 20 years. I believe in Strausstrup brackets. I don't care what that machine does, right? I will not use those brackets, right? That's an issue to someone, not to me. I prefer going back. It's actually relatively straightforward. What you find is the repetition and the frequency of repetition, because you start off small. The first 3 or 4 nodes you do on a leaf are painful. After that, it's purely mechanical. And the only reason you keep doing it that way is because you're scared. You know, you don't want to break it. You're following a thing. You're unit testing. You're running 20 minutes later. Unit tests are finished. Yeah, it's linted. Okay, that one's done. I'm checking it all in, and you're doing it basically like folder by folder, checking in each folder as you go along. It's a purely mechanical way, and I can imagine with a very, very large project, it'll be a pain. But it's certainly a way of doing it, and it works. admittedly, you know, it's not an enormous project, but this is one approach. It's not a bad approach. It may not be the best approach, and I'm really open to any improvements because I've got a whole bunch of people that are going to have to be doing this sometime in the near future. All of our web-based stuff and all our other stuff in the current company I'm at.
Why do you use Perl and not just use a node replacement? Because of the support for regular expressions, or?
Because I'm a wizard old AT&T Bell Labs Git, and they hate. Actually, what I did find out whilst I was doing this, interesting piece of information: Perl compatible regular expressions. Okay, I kind of loathe them. Probably we all do. Unfortunately, I discovered it was an English guy, and it was a lot better. There are some better options. All the Bell Labs people I worked for were kind of against it. And the star we use, it's called the Rainer star for when you do globbing. It's an American guy's invention from Princeton in New Jersey in 1956. So I found out a few things whilst I was doing this, questioning myself, why am I using Perl? Because I know that hack and I've used it for years. You know, I'm on a Mac, so it's on there.
So, so at Facebook, I mean, the number of files, you know, we need to modify when we do this type of thing is like, you know, incredibly huge. So what we do is, so we have like code mods, what we call code mods. Most of them are open source.
Yeah.
And for some of them, we parse, you know, the actual AST of the file.
Yeah, yeah.
That contextual information to help us because sometimes it's, you know, it's.
Oh
not,
no, yeah,
it's not even enough to just run a regular expression.
I completely agree, and I'm hoping, looking at what's in the ecstasy, that that's actually what they're doing in their logic. But I imagine in any more complex, when I write code, fortunately enough, the big project I'm working on is just a huge RESTful API. I started it after all the good tools have been invented, so I could apply them beforehand. And when people look at it, they say, "God, that's really easy to understand." Well, not really. It's just Airbnb have already got a standard already. ESLint had already come out. I just adopted the tools other people had built for me and adopted their best practices and said, "Oh, they're my best practices too now." So I agree, with any really complex one, there's going to be a problem. But that is why I think you should just do it in a small fashion. You can take one section, try it. If it doesn't work, or perhaps you binary cut it and just do the other half of it, so you find your problems. But if you have mechanical unit tests, you're good. If you don't have unit tests, I pretty much think you're screwed.
Just break 10% of Facebook, nobody's gonna know.
Stuff gets broken all the time. We're talking about like.
But
Move fast at the same time.
But the flip side is
Move fast and break things, right?
the flip side is, what is the alternative for you? If you want a modern product, what are you going to do? I mean, this is essentially like when they had C and other language developer. Do you stay with a C-based product? Well, nobody did. So I'm just looking at. I don't think you've really got a choice. It's going to happen. It's just a case of when.
So how happy?
Yeah.
How happy are you with the output of X? I've also my team has used the code mod thing. How happy are you with X to 6? Because I don't know if I would agree that every single thing is or I don't know.
No, I wouldn't. I just when I did it with things, I said I found like 11, 12 things. Some things I probably did by hand. You know, they didn't work. They didn't lint. I didn't unit test. I mean. It's not a completely mechanical process. If it was, I just go from the top down to the bottom, it'll be done. No, it's not. I'm Kevin, I'm scared. I'm starting at the bottom, working up slowly, checking in, unit testing, integration testing. This way you don't have to get it done on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. This way you can do a small part on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. You know.
So how much of X to 6's output did you have to then change? Like, is that?
I think I probably. I couldn't give a percentage, but I could probably say like 1 in 5 files I had to do serious rethinking about.
Okay.
That's not a percentage. That's probably, you know, like I run it. How much of it didn't come out the way I liked? Okay. I didn't really want to have to write another tool. I've spent too long in my career writing tools, so I was happy. I got to where I wanted to go. Now I can see I wouldn't want to have to do this on Facebook's code base, But if you gave me a team to write the tools, I would do this on Facebook's code base, and I wouldn't be bothered because I'm sure your code is well structured and linted and integration tested. And given those prerequisites, I'm pretty sure that this is not as scary as you think it is.
No, it's not. People do it all the time.
What if your code isn't?
Then I'm afraid you're in a very dark place. And I truly believe that if you haven't, you'd be probably better off looking at what you've got and fixing it first.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can start off with a bird's nest and weave a silk scarf out of it. You've got to make a small silk scarf first and then turn it into a hat. Hey.
I was curious.
Last question.
I was just curious if you know of any browser vendors that have publicly committed to a timeline for the transition from ES5 to the future.
You mean completing the transition? Because they're all somewhere along.
Okay. I can answer that, but only with a quote from the Brooklyn JS meetup from Brendan Ike. Now I'll give you a quote. This is his quote. I think this answers it. Google is Microsoft. Apple is Apple.
And Google is
No. What's it? No. Microsoft is Mozilla. Google is Microsoft and Apple is Apple. And that about best describes it, because he's getting pushback from Google now, saying they've got these features, but now they're behaving more like Microsoft used to do in the bad old days, and pushing back saying, no, this looks a bit hard, we don't want to do this. So that's the best answer. Google's Microsoft, Microsoft is now Mozilla, open source, and Apple is still Apple. That's basically, I thought, a very good summary. The way he put it, because I can't answer the question, but I can give you a good man's quote, and that's how he views the world.
Well, if WebKit is an indicator, then the next Safari will be 90% ES6 compliance as well, but I don't know how many years that will take. So WebKit is there, Safari not yet. All the other browsers are getting there, and yeah, Safari on iOS 9 is pretty amazing in ES6 already. So when you do feature testing or you use something like TypeScript that converts only to partials that are not supported, then you're already there. So sometimes using a superset language like TypeScript might be the better option than to go through 10,000 transpilations.
Okay. So I'll end this talk, and I want to ask the question I asked last time I did a talk for John Paul about how many of you would be prepared to work in Newark, because I think we got laughed at. But thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Glenn. So hello. I'm going to be as quickly as possible because I know that I don't want to cut off future question time because that's very important. So first, I want to say thank you. I'm saying thank you to a lot of people. Thank you so much to Facebook, to the people who allowed us to take up this space, bring all of you here together tonight. I'm very happy about that. They are hiring, of course. Additionally, so Glenn's company, who you just heard some amazing things from Kiswe, they sponsored the food here tonight. They are in Newark, but they are hiring.
We're in New Jersey. We nearly went to Newark, and now we're very undecided.
Oh, sorry. Let me take it all back. They are not in Newark, but in New Jersey. They almost went to Newark, and they are also hiring. And you would get to work with the amazing Glenn Hinks. So there are, of course, many people hiring across the board. If you are at all interested, please feel free to reach out to me. I will connect you with either Facebook or Kiswe as necessary. They're gratefully, almost everyone in New York, almost every company is doing some pretty awesome things and are always hiring JavaScript and web people like us. So usually at this particular time in a meetup, I implore all of you to go sign up for a meetup that is going to happen next month. Because for like 5 minutes, I will open up the RSVPs. Because of how this timing has worked out, I do not have that other meetup completely prepared and scheduled yet. But roughly, it will be the second Tuesday of January. I will be emailing the people who are here. We have a checklist actually of the people who did show up. Because gratefully, there's not that many seats empty, but because this was our first meetup here, we did not have lots of space, so we wanted to make sure that you were all here. For the people who did actually make it, because you have committed and fulfilled that commitment, you will continue to get that 5-minute leeway. So I will email all of you before. And the typical caveat still applies. If you are in this group and you email me the day of or the day before, asking to get in, I will have absolutely no sympathy. Okay? So you are all lucky, you have early access, not very far early access, but you will have early access. I'm very excited and hope to see all of you at our next meetup and the subsequent ones all through next year. Next year we have lots of plans. Me and Bulos have already been talking, and I'd love to continue to talk with other people as well, potentially adding back the video podcast. I don't know if any of you saw what we had going last year as well, potentially adding some other meetups per month, maybe hacker hours or something like that. We're going to continue growing and continue planning, and I'm very excited about that. So additionally, on the usual rants that I give, after this, I hope to see you all at a local drinking establishment. You do not have to drink, I will not be, but I will be talking about JavaScript and HTML and other things. So I haven't specifically gotten any suggestions from people, but since I went to school around this area, and I'm picking an extremely hilarious bar for me to show up at this many years after I graduated from school, but it is called Central Bar. It is less than a 2-minute walk from the door here. Is that a Facebook bar? Did they go there?
No.
Okay, it's like a minute that way. You can basically see it from the door of 770 Broadway.
It's still around.
You can Google Maps this. I do not confirm that. I am fairly sure it is still around.
It is.
It is, okay, so it is still around. It is right across the street. I hope to see all of you, or many of you there, to continue the conversation tonight, especially if we don't have time for questions for very, very long. So please reach out to me if you need anything. You have, I believe, through email, through Meetup, you have emails and phone numbers or anything like that. I would love to connect you with our sponsors if you do happen to be looking for a job, as well as talk to you further about speaking at the meetup, helping organize, or just showing up all 12 or 11 or so of next year's meetups. So with that sort of wrapped up, I'd love to introduce Chris Heilmann. He's going to talk to us about many things and things to learn about right now.
I normally do a recording of stuff, so I know what I said, because I never know. I just basically do a free fall on top of some slides that I put together, because I just want to talk about stuff. I'm Chris Heilmann. I'm from England. Well, I'm from Germany, but I live in England because in London it doesn't matter where you're from, and people don't throw you out for being ginger or something like that. It's actually quite nice. And I've been an HTML5 advocate from the very beginning of it, and I've worked for several companies building large JavaScript frameworks, applications, these kind of things. Basically, I started as a web developer when all the Java people were smiling at us begrudgingly and saying yeah, your toy language will never gonna make it, and HTML is just for people who don't know how VB-script works. And it's good to feel smug about this for a while. And as this is an HTML5 meetup, I thought it's a good opportunity to take a bit of a look back of how much of a relationship I had with open web standards and how that worked out in the whole rolling out of these standards and what we're looking at right now. So I'm not going to go into details about technical implementations, but this is more a call to you to help me in my fight for the open web and in my fight for open standards. And that's why I built a Tinder-like interface to show my long-term relationship with the open web, which is on GitHub as well. So if you need that for whatever reason, you might want to have an interface like that. That's basically 10 lines of JavaScript using just callbacks and animations, so you don't need anything like massive frameworks for these kind of things. And that's the beauty of browsers nowadays, because they all become better, much, much better than they were before. So I'm CodePoet on Twitter, so if you don't have enough pictures of hedgehogs and kittens and stuff in your life, that's always a good place to go. So that's a good thing, so let's go with that. And I love the web, and I loved it since the very beginning because I was a radio journalist and I was a newscaster, and I realized that getting known in your city is hard enough. Getting known countrywide is really hard. Getting known worldwide means you have to commit a crime or spend a lot of money. And with the internet, you didn't have to do any of them. You could, but you didn't have to. So when you published something, people would translate it into Chinese for you all of a sudden, and you hope they translated it the right way and didn't put other things in there. But it was just incredible how, when I started with the internet for the first time, oh my god, I don't have to type in different telephone numbers to reach different servers. I could just type in a character sequence, and out of a sudden I'm in a server from another country. I could buy products that are not available in my country and get them sent to me, and hopefully my postman will not lose them like they do always in England. But the physical space is what we're still fixing somehow. But the web itself, to me, was never a software platform, and I think it's kind of painful when people see it as that. And now that we are the cool kids and everybody looks up to us as being the only market where people are getting hired, everybody goes oh yeah, you gotta have a degree from this and that university to be a web developer. And I think the expert term for that is bullshit. because in essence, everybody's invited to build things on the internet. And even if it was a little Tumblr page, even if it's a Facebook page, you're a publisher on the internet, you're invited to publish on the internet. So the arrogance of people saying we need more coders, we need more developers, we need more makers, we need more creative people and people that use the internet in the right fashion, rather than building something small and putting shitloads of ads on it and wondering why people don't look at it. But that's just me being happy about this. But I love the web, and I think it made my career. I never went to university, I didn't finish any job education, I would be probably homeless in Germany if I had stayed there. So now I'm actually lecturing at universities, and I love that. Like, I was in MIT, and I was texting my mom, like, I'm in MIT. They're gonna find out that you haven't been to university. Yeah, mom, they know, they still invited me. Yeah, but that's only for rich people, what are you doing there, you know? Like, for her, it was just mind-blowing that somebody would get this monkey on stage and tell them about things. It was about accessibility back then. So I love the web, and that hasn't changed. And I love the web most because of HTML5 and web standards. And we don't value those enough anymore, because browsers are so wonderfully forgiving. You can type in whatever you want and something comes out of it. But when I started as a web developer, my main knowledge in the first 3 years was to know how different browsers mess up. So that was how I got contracts, because I knew how to make a layout work in Netscape 4 and in Internet Explorer 5. All of this knowledge is absolutely unnecessary and totally terrible that I still have it. But back then it was the only thing, and that's why people like Heilmann and the WOT working groups and in the Web Standards org and these kind of communities that I worked in as well, we basically said, you know, Microsoft, no, we're not going to build stuff just for you. We want to write one code base for all the browsers out there, and that's why we have HTML standards, that's why we have JavaScript standards, and that's what you should support. And that Microsoft more or less listened after a long, long time, and the others started as well. And I think we undervalue that benefit that we have, because if you write an app for Android and an app for iOS, that's a completely different skill set. That's a different SDK, that's a different way of approaching it, whereas building it for all the browsers out there and all the form factors that the web is running on is one way of coding and one way of making. And I think it's incredible what we can do with developer tools and things like that in the browser already. So these are great, great standards. The only problem is, like, the party pooper on that whole thing was always Internet Explorer. It was like we had our great web standards party, and that was basically the turn in the punch bowl, because whatever we did, Internet Explorer just did not die, because it was connected with the operating system. When you didn't upgrade the operating system, you didn't get a new browser. And as much as we like to think that everybody will upgrades and gets new evergreen browsers and is super excited of rebuilding their computer every 3 days because there's a new version of Linux out, most of the people out there are not. They just click on an icon and then they basically go to the internet and look at Yahoo what the weather is like, instead of looking out the window and look at the weather. But that's why we made the Microsoft Edge logo look like the Internet Explorer logo as well, because we did not want to confuse people. Before that, we had Microsoft Edge and the Windows 10 upgrade, I always went to people's Windows machines and installed Firefox and changed the icon to the Internet Explorer icon, because all they did was click it and they're like, oh, it looks different. Yeah, they changed it. You know, it's like, end users did not need to know, and sadly enough, we as developers always think like, ooh, we need to know everything about computers. So Internet Explorer was the party pooper and was a problem with it. Internet Explorer 11 was actually really good. It was a good browser that supported all the standards that people wanted to have. The only problem is the cool kids, including me, well, cool kids and me, basically we didn't even know anymore, because we switched to Macs and Linux years ago. And it's quite funny that when in all these conferences that we go into, and I spoke at 37 this year, and I spoke at 42 last year, you only see people with Macs on stage while they're talking about like diversity in environments and open source. And it is quite interesting to see that. And that's why we didn't know what Microsoft was doing and how they were actually supporting the standards, because one thing that Microsoft cannot do is piss off a lot of enterprise clients. You know, banks, insurance companies, governments. These are people that do like 10-year contracts, and you cannot tell them like, well, that's experimental technology, it just blew up in your face, sorry about that. Your people don't need any pension plans any longer, that's fine. So they want to have standards. So when Microsoft got all with Internet Explorer 9, 10, 9 and 11, they basically said, we're standard compliant. And nobody cared. It was kind of bizarre, because we fought for standard compliance years and years. So it was an okay browser, but the problem is that it was strict standard compliance. So it came across as schoolmastery. You know, they said like, oh, we're the ones who support the rounded corners, and people got very excited about 3D cubes with videos on each side at the same time. So Firefox and Safari and Chrome were already innovating and were doing amazing things, amazing shiny things, and pushed the web platform towards something that native platforms only could do before, while Microsoft was very excited and went out of a sudden that you have rounded corners and drop shadows. Which was quite bizarre because drop shadows and rounded corners and gradients are really, really hard to do. And I worked on the Firefox engine, the CSS engine with people. These things are really hard to do. It took us like 5 years to make them work across browsers. And by then we had flat design. You know, everybody always complained like, oh, we don't have rounded corners. If only we had rounded corners, life would be so much better. And now we don't use them any longer. And you're like, really? Seems like every time the standard becomes a standard, people don't like it any longer. So the strict standard compliance was basically breaking the back of the Microsoft outreach. And I do work for Microsoft, but that's because they offered me a job. I'm hardly using their products myself, weirdly enough, and that's okay. But I think it's very, very important that we as a community understand that there's millions and millions of people out there that use Windows products. And you just go to a library, you go to a school, you go to any office, and you see these things in use. Just because we have these shiny, cool machines doesn't mean we're actually delivering for them. And as somebody who works on the web, my job is to make end users out there happy. My job is to make their lives easier. My job is to make them get an insurance, a quote, or a bank account really quickly. And when you look at insurance companies and bank sites, they look like 1997 hasn't not changed. Because we as the cool kids don't even look at these products. We instead build like little startups like that all use Bootstrap and all look the same and like, oh, look how creative we are. So I was ranting about this for a long, long time in the web standards community that we're not fixing the problems of the web, but we're actually doing our own stuff instead. And now we actually have a chance to do that. So strict standard compliance was a good thing, but it was actually a bad thing because people just did not care. Whereas the innovation in browsers was a thing that people really wanted. Like, oh my God, you got animation already, the other ones doesn't have. The problem was, when browsers innovated, they innovated not according to a standard, they innovated only to their browser. So that's why we had prefixes. So we had like the dash WebKit dash, the dash Moz dash, or we had like in JavaScript, you had the Moz or the WebKit prefixes in the method names. And this is all cool, but it's also very experimental. You cannot rely on this in production unless you actually tell the user they have to use one browser. And this is the worst thing you can do on the internet. Luckily enough, people don't like your product if you tell them to download a certain browser, and that is good because the web is built for everybody. Tim Berners-Lee, when he defined the web, he said it's independent of geography, ability, and environment. So if somebody has a Windows 95 machine and hasn't been upgraded for a long, long time, there's nothing you can do about this as a software developer. You can stomp your foot and call them Luddites, and you can say these are not people that I want to have, and then you realize out of a sudden that's a company that has 460,000 computers that are on this thing. Do you don't want to have people with that many employees looking at your product, or is it just for you to be cool? So I think it's very, very important that when we look at innovation in browsers, that in the last years, and especially with HTML5, a lot of browser innovation got into the standard, but a lot of browser innovation also became landfill of the web. Things that are incompatible with other browsers. And you go there and it says like, you need Chrome to see this. It was at Le Web in France the other day, and there was a great overheard when somebody said like, if your website only works in Chrome, you didn't build a website, you built a prototype. And that's the same with every other browser. Like, you cannot force people to use one browser, especially in a world where mobile devices, a lot of them are hardwired to the operating system. Older Samsung devices have a terrible old WebKit browser in them that doesn't get upgraded when Google comes out with a new version of Android. The whole of China and Russia doesn't want to go to the Play Store in California, so they don't get a new version of Chrome all the time as well. So the whole problem of Windows 95, the browser hardwired with the operating system, still happens on mobile devices. So innovation in browsers is a good thing, but also a bad thing, but I'll give it a good thing for now. And then, of course, we started building libraries. So instead of waiting for browsers to become better or browsers to start communicating with each other and making the different experimental implementations into a standardized application implementation, we wrote a library to do that. That was always the thing about jQuery. If you use jQuery, you don't have to worry about browsers because it fixes every problem for you. And yeah, it does. There's a lot of like 80% of jQuery is like, well, 20% is giving you a better syntax, making it easier for you to write code, and a lot of it is just fixing problems in browsers for you. The problem is, of course, that these browsers never got fixed then because the problems didn't show up in products any longer. So there was no incentive for the browser maker to fix anything in their browser if people didn't complain about it because they just used libraries. The issue with that, of course, is when the library gets outdated and the library becomes the thing that is a problem. So a lot of like very bad ideas in technology, like user agent sniffing and prefixes in browsers, are now part of the operating system and part of the libraries that people use. And I work, for example, with a company in England that has 140,000 pages on their site and maintained by 26 different departments that don't talk to each other, because why would they? That's other human beings, that's terrible. And I met this poor guy who had to basically refactor the whole website now. And he said, we only know how old parts of our web page are by seeing which version of jQuery that they used. So it's like rings in a tree trunk, is what he called it. It was just amazing. So that's a terrible thing. It was a good thing at the time, but a bad thing in the long run, because we abstracted problems away rather than fixing the problems. So when I started at Microsoft, this was the pitch that I got, because I came from Firefox. I worked on Firefox OS, and they told me we're gonna bring out a new browser. It's called Microsoft Edge. I wanted to call it Microsoft Water Weasel, but they didn't want to do that. And it's going to be an evergreen browser. It's going to be the same across all form factors. It's going to be standards compliant, and it's going to be comparable to other browsers. And I'm like, cool, because I hate Internet Explorer with a passion as a web developer, and I want this thing to die. So I said, like, okay, if I can be part of this, that makes that happen, and it's not just you telling me this in a job interview, but I really see what's going on. I want to be part of this, and this is pretty amazing. So this is what happened. However, we put the browser out on the web, the cool new standard compliant browser. We forked the Internet Explorer engine. We got rid of all the code that only was Internet Explorer, and we then put it on the web and said, like, the web's probably awesome on that, right? No, because we still got the interface that was meant for Internet Explorer 6, because people checked for Safari. People did a user agent sniffing and said, like, if it's Safari, then give it the shiny thing. If it's any other browser, give it the I hate you from 1998 interface, and I hope you're gonna click until you're unhappy and leave, because why would you spend money on us? So that's a big issue. User agent sniffing is the biggest problem, and that is not only Microsoft, that we had the same problem in Mozilla, we have the same problem in Chrome, we have the same problem in Safari, that people try to detect the browser. And here's the #1 truth to take away. You have no idea what the browser is, and you will not be able to detect it with code. Because I can fake any browser. I've got this wonderful extension here, for example, on my Firefox, that's default user agent, and I can define any browser that I want to. And I do that because in Europe there's some cheap airlines that give you cheaper prices when you have an Internet Explorer than with a Safari browser. Because they expect you to have a Mac to have more money, I don't know. But it's just fun that you can do that. You can simulate an iPhone 3 and so on and so forth. I think that's really important, that we understand that you cannot test this. And people like Facebook and others have real issues with that as well. And it boils down to the impossible dream of making one interface that looks the same in every browser. You can do that by publishing a JPEG. And even that is not the same across browsers, because it looks different from gamma to gamma from different screens. The idea of an interface that looks the same in every browser and form factor means you're actually using the internet completely wrong. The idea of a web product is that it is better when the environment is better, and it's still usable when the environment is terrible. So start from something that works and move it up. You can turn off JavaScript in Google, it is still a search box that works. If you turn it on, then basically it's the autocomplete and all the beautiful things that you have. And that's as simple as it is to build things on the web. Experimental features using prefixes were the big thing when the HTML5 thing came out and new browser wars started. Like, oh, we got animations already, we got gradients already, and all of those came with different prefixes, and people rely on them. So when you go on the web and you search around, you find like lots of white buttons with white text, because the background is just a WebKit gradient. So if you don't have a WebKit browser, you don't get any background at all, and the only way to know what that button is like highlight the whole page or use the developer tools or something like that. And that's a terrible way of working. But we, for example, in Edge, we had to alias lots and lots of WebKit prefixes and also some Mozilla prefixes to not break the web and get the real experience. And that was painful, because we wanted to get IE go away and the massively bloated, very terrible browser. We got lots and lots of code out. We were like, oh, look at this lean thing, this is amazing. And we put the standards in, and it was still lean and mean, and then all of a sudden we had to put more and more interoperability fixes in it. And all the browsers are about, like, of the 15, 16 meg that most browsers are without fonts, 4 or 5 of them are just interoperability between browsers, because people rely on that stuff. And it's just, if it says experimental, just think of like the Muppet Labs, you know, where things explode and Beaker dies every single time. This is what experimental is. So this was bad and people still rely on it. Outdated libraries was the other issue. As I said, all the jQueries, all the Moo tools, some of them actually have methods in there that ES6 now has natively, and we could not release the ES6 standard until we renamed them, because we couldn't break old websites. For example, array contains is now array index off, because array contains was used by Moo tools, and some government websites would not work anymore if our JavaScript engine and V8 and JavaScript core on Safari would have had that method. So the library helpers of the past became the landfill of the future, and that's a bad thing as well. And of course you got broken implementations becoming de facto standards, which is always my favorite word. Like, it's a de facto standard, it's a slightly pregnant person. You know, it's like, no, this is either you have a standard or you don't have a standard. A standard needs ratification, a standard needs several people to implement it, to test it against it, and then have something with there. So what did we do if something was working in Chrome and Firefox in one way, but was defined in a standard the other way? So we could stand up on our high horse and say like, well, the standard is different, they're doing it wrong. And everybody would be saying like, no, Chrome doing something wrong, that's impossible. You know, so a lot of the de facto standards had to be built in the browser, and we had to violate the standard. Sounds theatrical, it's not really, standards don't feel anything. But it's just bizarre that a lot of things become de facto standards because they're easier. And easy is sometimes a thing that you should think about. Less code, it always cracks me up when people get super excited like, oh, my library allows you to write less code. You're like, oh, the web is already too full. The average website is 2.2 meg with 170 resources. So I'd rather write more code that's readable than write less code that's shorter, because I came from Perl, which looks like minified Python. You know, it's very simple to write one line of Perl is completely unreadable, that does everything on this planet. So writing less code, to me, also teaches you to be much more lazy in your approach to it. When you write a bit more, you think about it a bit more. It's like muscle memory. It's first time you learn driving a car, you basically go in there and you see all the levers and everything, and you're like, I will never remember this. But nowadays you can go into any car and you can just start driving that, but you don't think about that anymore because you repeated the thing so many times it became a second nature to you. Best thing in America is you want to have a car that cannot get stolen, just get a stick shift, because half the people wouldn't know what to do with that. So then we released the browser fully with all that stuff in there. So we had compatibility with the other browsers and the de facto standards that were out there. And now it's a browser that you can forget about. And that's kind of weird, but I love that, because I want all browsers to be forgettable for us as developers. We should not have to install every single browser on our machines and test against all of them. That's a waste of our time. We should spend our time building interfaces, building solutions, building code that is beautiful and actually maintainable, rather than knowing how browsers mess up. And a lot of the forgotten standards are now usable. That's the cool thing as well. When HTML5 came out, everything became we had our test drive in Microsoft, we had the demo studio in Mozilla, we have Chrome experiments, Safari had a few experiment websites like HTML5.com. All of these things are just basically shiny things like particle systems, every single cartoon character painted with CSS only, and these kind of things. None of these things were really usable. They were just like, oh, look how a shiny thing that I can do, which is quite hilarious because everybody was like, oh, Flash was so useless. Flash only had this shiny stuff. Look, I can do it in HTML5 now. And you're like, what? The JSConf Asia that I just spoke in Singapore had a starting page that had a skip link. And I'm like, really? You know, Flash tunnels are dead for a long, long time. Now we do it in HTML5, but okay. But a lot of these standards are now usable, and there's great stuff in there. There's drag and drop uploading. There's things like image generation, and I did, for example, this thumbnail thing that I found really, really cool, createthumbnails.com, or something like that. Let's make thumbnails.com, which allows you to take some images of your hard drive, and now I gotta find some non-embarrassing ones that would probably be good. Image bucket cartoons, that can't be wrong. So you take those, and there's a GIF in there, and you drag them into the browser, and in the browser it then creates a zip file of thumbnails for you. So I resize them all on the fly, I create a zip file, and that's all client side. There's no server involved, there's nothing involved. And this stuff is on GitHub. You can try it out. You can also see the thumbnails that are generated. And you can also define the options of the thumbnail. So you can say, like, if you want to have another size, let's say like 100 and 200. You can have the quality different to like bad JPEG, good JPEG. You can crop it or not crop it. So in this case, I add it to the other one. You can set the background color. That's just input type color. There's no jQuery involved in this one as well. And this is all possible in the browser nowadays, and people don't use that. Many upload forms are still like, please select 15 files and hate your life by the time you're actually getting to your expenses back. This stuff is in the browser, and we should be using them. But it's not sexy, it's not cool, it's not like functional programming and reactive whatever. That's why people don't even look at these things. And I think it's very important that they're usable and across browsers. And there's this great website called caniuse.com that shows you all the different features in browsers that you can say, for example, drag and drop. And then it shows you which browser supports it and which one doesn't, and it has all the information about how it doesn't support it, and so on and so forth. So before you go to that jQuery plugin, before you go to that library or go to GitHub and look for drag and drop library, just take a look at what browsers are supporting it and say like, okay, if the browsers that don't support it make it an input type file, then people can pick it still. For the others, they can drag and drop it into it. And if you make the input type file display block and make it the whole screen, then everybody has drag and drop, because that's how it works in browsers anyways. JavaScript, of course, turned to ES6, and that's amazing, because now we have finally a standardized new version of JavaScript. It took us 15 years to get there, because in between we had like all the stuff from Flash and all the things that then we had like CoffeeScript and all the other prefixes and kind of stuff. And ES6 is not for everybody. You shouldn't feel depressed if you look at like the Tech Press or Tech Meme or whatever, and you see every new day, oh, you don't use destructuring yet. You probably will be homeless next month, because everybody needs to use that right now. There's lots of features in ES6 that are not for everybody, and some of them are for everybody. So take your pick as well. Every part of ES6 is for different audiences. And it's encouraging though, like as I said before, there's Kangax, GitHub.io, I think he works for Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he does this really cool compatibility table which shows you all the features of ES6 and which browser supports it to which level. And this one got more and more green over the last few years, and I'm very, very happy about this. Again, look at those things, see if they work out for you, and then start playing with them. But don't get discouraged when you think like, oh, I don't know about promises. Promises are very important, but you don't need to write your own. Transpilers for old environments, thanks very much. Babel.js.io, the guy who wrote it is now at Facebook as well.
Sebastian McKenzie.
Australian guy, absolutely lovely. And yeah, we heard that before. This is when you really want to support every browser with it. Use transpilers to convert ES6 code to ES5 code. It's a bit of a problem because you only create ES5 code for every browser then, so all the implementations of ES6 in the browsers never get used. So we cannot tweak the browser and make them faster, the implementation of ES6 faster, because the code never gets executed in the browser itself. So you got to think about that a bit. This is basically what it looks like. Anyways, don't know why I went in there. You can do things like TypeScript, which is, if you really want to go full on, I want to have a type-safe language, because ES6 has classes, ES6 has constants, has let, which is a block-level statement, but it doesn't have any type safety yet, because JavaScript just doesn't have it. And even the classes in ES6 are just simulated syntactic sugar, because under the hood they're just factory methods. But in TypeScript you can have type safety, which means for you probably not much, but if you build something like Facebook, you build something for Google Mail, then any variable that knows that it's an integer doesn't need the memory needed for a string, or something that can get converted into a string. So for IoT devices, for low-end mobile devices, this is a very powerful thing to have. So a lot of people use TypeScript to build libraries with. The Dojo Foundation is using TypeScript. Angular 2 is written in TypeScript now, because it's written in JavaScript that converts to JavaScript, which is pretty awesome. And under the hood, TypeScript understands what the environment understands in ES6 and uses it when it's possible, and only transpiles the things to ES5 that are not supported. In-browser developer tools are incredible. It's like you can build a whole website in the browser now without doing anything else. I mean, you can go into your developer tools, go inspect here like in Firefox, and you can start writing your HTML. You have your stop points, you have style editors with color pickers and all kind of stuff in there. And this is just amazing. I mean, back when I started, I had alerts, and that was all I had. And nowadays, you can even find out when the browser was scrolling, how the performance was, where your memory went. You have detailed insights into what every browser does. So please use these developer tools and get used to them, because there's incredible stuff in there. One of my favorite things in Firefox that you probably don't know about, it has this console in there, but it also has a console for the browser itself. So if you do Shift F2, function F2, you get a control for the whole browser. And I know a few blind developers that use that to debug websites, for example. So one of my favorite things here is screenshot. If you type screenshot, then it creates a screenshot of the page. If you type screenshot -- clipboard, it puts the screenshot inside your clipboard. If you do screenshot clipboard -- full screen, it's a full page, it scrolls the whole page and takes a screenshot of it. That's how I make 90% of my slides nowadays, instead of installing some extra software that does that for me. So these are the kind of things that you have in browsers nowadays, instead of always complaining that the browser environment is not good enough for development. We've got kick-ass editors and debuggers. We saw a few of the tools earlier, like JSLint, ESLint, NPM, Node. All these environments are incredible. I got used to Visual Studio Code now because we just open sourced that. And I was a Sublime Text user before that. Atom is another one that people are using. What I really, really like about that one is the CSS stuff. So if you have a CSS embedded in the page, we're now trying to find one, your demo styles, for example. So if you have a color in that one and you start typing it in, it gives you a drop down of all the colors with their names. And that's pretty awesome. Rather than having to do a color picker and those kind of things, you have that directly in the editor itself. And the editor is also tying in with GitHub. So if you now have GitHub, you can put the message in there and send it there without going to your command line and all of this thing. This thing is built in JavaScript. This is written in ES6 and it's on GitHub available as open source. And this is just amazing that we can write our tools for writing our languages now in the languages that we're writing them in. Something like that. I think there was a sentence there somewhere. In any case, we have amazing debuggers and stuff. Remote debugging services and tools, you can connect the phone to your computer and debug the phone on your desktop. You click things on the phone and you see the results on your desktop. You can use Winery or like Volon.js and these kind of things to test devices that are on the other side of the planet with a VPN somewhere. It's incredible what we can do with that. And if you're not using that yet, please think about it, because installing everything on your machine means that your machine is the test platform and not the web. We've got open communication channels. Every browser has a GitHub repository, every browser has a Twitter account, some of them have Slack channels, and you can talk to browser makers the way you want to. In our case, uservoice.modern.ie is if you want to have something in Edge that's not there, please tell us there about it. Don't go to Twitter and complain that we don't do it, because that just wastes everybody's time. Go to where the developers of the browsers are and complain there, because then they can fix it rather than the PR department coming to them. Participation is very welcome. Play with that stuff, especially across platform stuff is very, very important that more people do it. And assume that the future is bright. I think the biggest problem that we have with craft on the web that made us having to do the things that we had to do in the browser to make it compatible is because people assumed unknown is terrible. Assume that unknown is good. Browsers are evergreen now. Every new operating system comes out will have a good browser in it. So if you cannot detect it, assume that it's a good one. And there's a great stuff coming out. Offline web solutions, Chrome Summit just had the whole talk about everything about Service Worker. It's basically an HTTP router in JavaScript. It's amazing what you can do with Service Worker, and there's good stuff coming. Device capability access. Accessing the camera is incredibly simple now. So uploading images, you can always have a little button in there saying people like, please upload an image. And I just wrote that for our team here when I had a simple cam shot thing. Oh, is my local still running? Yeah. So this is a JavaScript that you can say like, okay, start the camera, and then it says like share the selected device. And you can do a hello, and hopefully. And you click on it, you take a screenshot of it, and then you stop the camera again. And this is progressively enhanced. So if the browser has no camera access, this button doesn't appear. All you put is in the page is a div with a class on it, and you call an init function with that CSS selector. And if the browser doesn't support it, the end user never has to know. And this is what JavaScript is about. Not like tell the user that they're terrible and they should upgrade their browser and basically are not cool enough to use your website. That stuff is all available across browsers nowadays, and you can use it in a simple JavaScript here. Componentization, modularization, we've got web components for a long time, thinking about it. Bit of a blowback on that one, but ES6 modules and Webpack modules and stuff like that, we can write massive JavaScripts in little unique packets rather than one big monolith. And simplification due to convenience method and more capable browsers. So take a look at caniuse.com before you use those 12 libraries again, just to make something simple work. And sometimes think about, like, do people really need this? Do people really want to have a carousel again? No, they don't. Believe me, they don't. Any user testing shows you that. Stop thinking in browsers and start thinking in opportunities. IE6 is dead. It's a retired browser. It sits in the park and feeds the ducks. That's what it should be doing. Don't give it any animations. Don't give it any beautiful interfaces. IE6 users seeing something beautiful just get confused. They will not know what it is. Just give them something that works. And let's clean up this mess and make way to the future. I think the problem that the web is right now, that we're keeping cruft and we're keeping problems all the time because we think old browsers are still around, are not around anymore, and instead we should write simple functionality and enhance it for the better browsers. That way we will always work for the next generation and not for the last generation. There's a great tool called Static Scan, which allows you to enter a website and it shows you what the problems in it is. So it shows you when you have like browser sniffing and these kind of things. Oh, that's going to be fun. And there you basically say, like, okay, we got CSS prefix in use, for example, and these are the selectors that we found and where they are. So you can take a look at that. Are they still necessary, or are they actually just cruft from before? Like MS Transform is not supported anymore, so that can be deleted. Every code you can delete is probably a good thing for your end users out there. Cross-browser experience, is it responsive? Does it pre-render and pre-fetch? Are they missing alt attributes? Windows features, who cares? But I think it's very interesting to show this to clients and see how they can make their websites a bit faster. And that one is also on GitHub, so you can run that behind a firewall. You can even run it as part of your ongoing integration testing. That's all I had, so thanks very much.
That last thing was called Static Scan?
Static Scan, yeah. So basically, if you go to dev.modern.ie, and from there it gets redirected, and there is the tools, and there you got the site scan, it's called here.
Okay.
There's also browser screenshots where you can screenshots from 12 different browsers, and so on and so forth. There's other tools out there, but this is something that I maintain at the moment. So
You got redirected. What was it?
dev.modern.ie.
Modern.ie.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, I have a quick question. Open questions?
No, of course not.
Okay.
I'm just waiting for you to ask the question.
Okay.
How British are you?
Well, okay. I'd like you to reiterate, just so everyone can hear. It's not a question. I'd like you to say it again, but explain why people will not get any benefits from performance when they transpile, and round it home a bit more, because they're really not using that part of the engine that's faster now.
Yeah, so the transpilation problem is that you convert everything new into ES5 code. ES5 code that is optimized in a lot of cases, but also is a lot of code in other cases. You write a class inside your ES6 and it generates a massive factory function in ES5. So what you're doing is you give the technology of the old browser also to the new ones. So if we want to make ES6 fast, what we need to do is have people use ES6. And that's with any feature, really, in the browser. If people don't use it, browser makers are not going to use it. They're not going to put it in there.
So I'm trying to reconcile two messages. I'm hearing support progressive enhancement, make sure you allow any browser to work and degrade gracefully.
No. Degrading gracefully is the most terrible idea ever. Enhance progressively.
Fine, enhance progressively, but if none of your JavaScript works because you have a user on IE9 and you have ES6 code, let me rephrase. What's your option with ES6 to not, how do you not transpile and use ES6? Because I can't wrap my head around it.
If you start an ES6 project right now.
I can't sniff, right? Because the sniffing is bad. So I can't have two languages and determine who gets it. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, how do I do anything other than transpile?
You can do feature testing. There's a great library called featuretests.io. Now I can't type on my own keyboard anymore. Interesting. That one gives you just, with that script in there, it shows you what the browser can support right now. So you can say let const generators and so on and so forth. You could do that. But I think it's more important to think about when you start an ES6 project nowadays. Do you really need JavaScript in Internet Explorer 9? Or do you make your HTML, work with a reload, have a universal app that runs the JavaScript on the server for those browsers and runs it on the client for the ones that can do it? So the idea of ES6 is that it works client-side and server-side. For the browsers so you do a feature testing on the browser, and you render everything on the server for the old Internet Explorers, and you render everything on the client for the browsers that can't do it, and you still maintain the same code base. That's the main thing. If your tool doesn't work without JavaScript at all, then you're in trouble anyways, because there's so many things out there that can interfere with your JavaScript, and JavaScript errors are rampant. And if you think about the markets where the new users are, the next users are, like Indonesia, Africa, India, they have people using proxy browsers like Opera Mini that actually take out any JavaScript that takes longer than 1.2 seconds to execute as well. So these are the limits that we should be thinking about all the time. It's very exciting to write a single-page application on our MacBook Pro with 8 cores and and think we're actually making a good experience. But when our end users out there are actually waiting 16 seconds for the thing, my favorite is the NASA website. This is the NASA website on a 100 megabit connection. So it gives you about 7 seconds of the vastness of space and darkness of what it looks like. And then it gives you a few boxes with spinners in there starting to load. And this is because it's using Ember and jQuery inside one 3 megabyte file that has been put in there without a deferrer. And that's the kind of thing that drives me crazy. Because we work on these fast connections on these great computers, we assume everybody else does as well. There's nothing more important than performance of your site. And there's a great thing as well if you want to test with that. There's webpagetest.org, which is absolutely amazing. You give it a URL. I'm not going to do Facebook now. Let's see if my site's doing it. We don't have time. So this one allows you to use to simulate different environments and different speeds and different servers and browsers, and it gives you a great test result at the end of it. In this case now it's a Nexus 7 device on 3G in Dulles, Virginia, and then it shows me how long my website took to actually go that, and the video that I just showed from NASA was done with that tool as well. So it's a great opportunity. But back to the thing. Universal JavaScript works around that problem. If you run it client-side and server-side, and you do a feature testing, if the client can do it, you maintain one code base and you make everybody happy. But think about how much code you generate. Because ES5 transpilation from ES6 can create massive amounts of code. So that's something to take a look at as well. In essence, we should never, right now, we develop convenience over end-user experience, and I think that's because we became selfish. And I think that's something we have to very much think about if we want to cater to the next people that are out there, as I said, in the countries that are not ours, but where there's millions of new users coming to the web every single day, and they all come on mobile devices that are like 2 years old and will not get upgrades. Cool.
What's your suggested method of feature sniffing then?
Featuretest.io is really, really good for that. It's kind of dirty at times because, for example, arrow functions, you can only do it by using an eval. So if you work in a coarse environment or a high security environment, you cannot do the sniffing, but you cannot use most libraries either because they do your evaling under the hood. The good thing about featuretest.io is as well is that it doesn't test it every single time, but it keeps the results in local storage. So it tests it every week, or you can define it everywhere else as well. You can define that thing. So when the user comes with the same browser, it doesn't do the feature testing again, which can be slow, so next time it already knows that the browser can do it or not.
Is this like a script that you put on there?
No, it's called, it's by Carl Simpson, Getify guy, and it's called featuretest.io. It's on GitHub as well. It's also quite funny because when in there you can just take a look at the feature test itself. So, and where's the GitHub repository? GitHub? It's on the GitHub, weirdly enough. I helped him to make it look not that terrible, but then he had his own build of like his own build of I/O, and I couldn't find anything to help him with. It was really annoying. But there's featuretests.js in there, and these are basically all the tests that he uses to go for that. So if you say like use strict one, let one, and it goes through the test suite. So if you want to just do a feature test or one or two features yourself, this is a great way to learn about all the tests that he's been using. And you don't have to talk to him on Twitter, because that normally takes a few days, because he's very chatty about things. Cool. Anything else?
One last thing. Now, just that Node Interactive important, Microsoft came along. They kind of introduced us to the sort of their JavaScript engine, Chakra. Is there any chance that will actually become a real competitor? I don't know if you're with like the V8 engine. I'm thinking about more like from a Node perspective. So I get to use. Okay, I want competition on the server side. I don't want to just be a Google.
This is private here, but in January it won't be private anymore.
Okay, that's good.
So the JavaScript engine Chakra core that runs inside Edge will be available open source from mid-January on, I think. And let's stop the recording.
Sure, I'll move it. Don't worry.
Yeah. But we.
That was announced actually.
Yeah, it is announced.
Yeah.
It's announced that it's open source, but
we didn't see this.
No, they did
No.
say January.
Is it a joke that the URL is Apple/Swift, or is this something you guys pull off?
That is a redirect on my own machine. I made a joke for people
Ah.
there. So weirdly enough, that's still in there for some reason. It's actually in my hosts file. So like, but yeah, the library is there. There's also a node build already with Chakra, and it actually, when you do the ES6 tests against the V8, it's much better than that. Also, it kills it on most of the speed comparisons at the moment. Will get better. I mean, these are changing every month, but it's like that's how we compete with each other. And the main thing about Chakra Core when it comes to Node is that it's optimized for IoT devices. So Windows 10 can run on a Raspberry Pi 2, and we use that because of that JavaScript library. There's a great talk, an in-detail talk about Chakra Engine. This one here on channel 9 called Chakra, the JavaScript engine that powers Microsoft Edge, that shows you all the architecture decisions that we made with like pre-compilation and just-in-time compilation and sub-compilation of things. There's incredible stuff in there that I don't understand, but people are very clever. And you can download it as well, because I watch all my talks offline in the gym rather than just online. And I hate that YouTube doesn't allow us to do that, but there's a great Ruby script that you can use to download any video on YouTube, I heard.
YouTube DM, that's great.
Yeah.
You can also pay YouTube now to do it.
Yeah.
Some amount of money per month.
In America, yes. In England, they don't want our stinking money, because obviously the British pound is not worth anything. Wait. Anyways.
Does the recent version, I know they just updated Visual Studio Code today. Does the recent version use Chakra Core, or is it still using?
I think it uses Chakra Core, I'm not sure.
It does.
Yeah, it's using Node, so whatever you have is being used.
Also, it relies on what's on the machine.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
I see.
Yeah, of course.
How many people, I mean, are in the Chakra team? I mean, was it 10, 20 people?
I think
Any
it's
ideas?
8, but I don't want to. I try to ask that question every time people are squirming about it, because I don't know if it's people that come in and out from other parts of the browser and work on Chakra itself. I know 2 people I talk to. It's a very small team, but it's a very
Because
dedicated team.
I have this fear, you know, I want some sort of body of people. I don't like when the internet to depend on, you know, Bob, Joe, and Kevin, and if they get the flu, that's it.
No. I mean, the team, you probably don't know that, and I didn't know that when I joined, but every universal application in Windows 10 is written in JavaScript. That's the main language of the operating system for applications in the future. So the JavaScript engine is the main necessity there. So it's not like something that will get out of fashion.
Just curious, what's behind the name? Chakra.
It starts with C and ends with A, that's all I know about it. We didn't want to go for monkeys or V9, I don't know why it's called Chakra.
Generally it means wheel.
Yeah, the main guy on it is an Indian guy, so maybe he chose it because of that. Like, yeah, it's the wheel that keeps on turning. I don't know. I think it's again, I'm terrible at naming things, but
Does this run on Mac and Linux?
the browser will not run on Mac and Linux, but the JavaScript engine will. Yeah. So yeah, the browser will not be available on Mac and Linux because it makes no sense. Sounds weird, but it really doesn't, because as I said, I want us to compete on the interface of browsers and not on the browsers itself. Releasing every browser on every platform is just for 5% of the market. Everybody else uses the browser that comes with the operating system. People should choose Chrome because of translation and things like the cloud services of Google, and not because it's the faster browser. If the browser of the operating system is slow, then that's a problem. And that will not be solved by offering people other browsers, because 90% of the users just don't do that. The same way people don't upgrade their flash, that's why the internet is full of malware.
Is Microsoft planning to introduce the testing and debugging tool like Batarang in Chrome?
Yeah, the F12 developer tools people are very much looking into these things. It's a bit slower because they're part of the Visual Studio team and not of the browser team. But there are a few testing tools that we're going to release soon. I actually saw something yesterday in an internal meeting that is not worth my job losing to show you, but there's stuff happening, yeah. But in general, WebDriver is supported in Edge as well. So anything that is remote driving Chrome can also run remote driving Edge. So a lot of these developer tools in Chrome are very much ahead of most of the others, because it's the biggest team of developers on that developer tools team as well. Like for example in Mozilla, I think we had 12 people, in Google is like 40. So they very much release a lot of stuff, and we're partly of the site now. If it's there as open source and people can use it, why should we write another one? We'd rather support the stuff that is out there and make it work in our browser as well, rather than just writing a competitive thing that people have to use again. Because I've got 200 megabyte of NPM modules on this machine. I have no idea what those things are. This is not safe. This is not a good idea as well.
Yeah, I mean, this development tools in Chrome are really, I mean, way ahead of time.
Yeah.
I mean, back, I mean, old days we used to use emulators to test various, I mean, smartphones and device applications, single-page application coded into various.
It's dangerous. I mean, the developer tools in Chrome are very, very good, have a lot of features in them, and actually at the Chrome Summit last week or 2 weeks ago, they announced that they're cutting down on features on them as well, because they realized it's complex, there's so many things in there, and simulating devices in a browser is a very good way to get an assumption, but you will not get around testing on a real physical device sooner or later. Because the latency, the touch interfaces, all these things is basically, you cannot say like, oh, I tested in an iPhone simulator, it's now okay for iPhone. In the end, you will have to end with test with real users, much like you cannot translate something with Google and release it in the Italian market and hope there's nothing embarrassing in your text. So simulating other devices in browsers is a convenience method, but, and also good for like finding like bottlenecks in terms of performance, but it is not 100% replacement of a real physical device, because especially in also Facebook's case with the Facebook phones, these things you can't even simulate yet. Cool.
Okay, thank you. Great, thank you so much, Chris. I had, while I was listening, I had a few different thoughts. One is, I hope that you're all going to be at Central Bar across the street in about, let's say, 7 minutes or so from right now. I'd love to continue this conversation, and I'm sure the many others. The other thought was, you know, that NASA thing was pretty slow, but considering that they're cool with, like, Houston, you have a problem taking 7 minutes to get here from the moon, they're probably completely fine with that kind of speed thing. So again, thank you to Facebook for this amazing venue. Thank you to Kiswe for providing our food and drinks tonight. Please let me know if you are looking for a job. I will put you in touch. Additionally, I am hiring for my own team, and I would love to work with each and every one of you. So please reach out for that reason as well. I will, as I said earlier, you will get notifications for the January meetup a little bit earlier. Again, thank you to Chris and Glenn for speaking tonight. I will see you all at the bar, and I will see you at the meetup in January.
everybody does the training. I think we like, the train ride,
Kind of riding, or are you,
yeah. It's like 40, 45 minutes.